Tech Tribe, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about women of color in STEM. It's not often that we see women of color being showcased in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and representation matters. I remember very early on that I had a passion and an interest in technology. I remember my mom purchasing my very first compact desktop computer, and it's compact, COMPAQ, from Walmart. I remember that. I remember writing my papers in WordPerfect, and I remember creating this code where I used loops in order to my final product would be a Christmas tree. I remember going through that and just thinking like, wow, this is awesome. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to do something in technology. And so I remember those times. And so when I went off to school, of course, it would just be natural that I pursue a career in computer science. And so that's what I did. And as I moved through my computer science time, studies in college, I remember going to my very first high-level coding class. And when I entered the classroom, there was nothing but men in there. I was the only woman in the classroom. And not only was I the only woman in that class, I was the only woman of color being represented in that classroom as well. And so I was a little intimidated because I wanted to know where were the girls that liked tech? Where were the girls that enjoyed coding? Where were the girls that enjoyed tinkering with a computer, figuring out the code, how to get this to work, stringing together lines of code in order to have your output be what you want it to be? Where were those girls? And I didn't find very many. And it was kind of disheartening to me. And so as I went on through my career, I began still having my hands in the tech field, but I went into education and then kind of merged my love of education and my love of tech together and kind of created this that I have. And so, but tech was always such a great component of my life. It was something that I enjoyed. And I was disheartened because I didn't know many women of color. They weren't advertised. They weren't highlighted. They weren't showcased. I didn't know very many women of color. And so when She Tech Desk became a reality for me, I knew that I wanted to dedicate a series on those pioneers, those women of color in technology, in science, in engineering, in mathematics. I knew that that was something that I wanted to do, to pay homage to them because I stood on their backs in order to be where I am. And so that's what this is. This is the first episode and first video in the series of women of color in STEM. And so this series is dedicated to spotlighting those pioneers, those innovators, those people who were before their time in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So each week we're going to spotlight a woman of color and celebrate her contributions to our society. So let's not act like that if without these contributions that we wouldn't be a little lost, because we would. Technology is such a huge component of our lives now, from our cell phones to our tablet, actually even to how our children are being taught right now. It's just a huge component of our lives. So without technology, we would be a little bit lost. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit, okay? So about 2 years ago, I actually came across a website called, it was a magazine that was highlighting a podcast that was called Never Nevertheless podcast. And what Nevertheless podcast does is it celebrates women transforming teaching and learning through technology. And so what Nevertheless did is that they commissioned 4 female illustrators to create posters of women in STEM. And so if you look behind me, you'll see the person that we are going to highlight today, and that's Miss Gladys West. And so when I looked at this website and saw that these posters were free, I was like, wow, this is great. This is such a great addition, or would be a great addition to a classroom where we could spotlight not only women's contribution to society, but we can also spotlight women in STEM. So it could be a great way to create some activities about women in STEM in a STEM center. Or it could be something where we can do activities about women and their contributions to our culture and our society. And so I had all these ideas running through my head. And let me just say this also. I am not being paid to promote Nevertheless podcast or the website. I just thought that this was, as a teacher, I thought this was an excellent tool to utilize in my classroom. And it was free. The posters were beautiful. The information was valid. And I thought it would be a great tool to utilize in my classroom. So I downloaded them. And when I started looking at the posters, I came across Miss Gladys West. And I wasn't really familiar with her, and so I started researching her. Before I go there, let me say this as well. You can drop down in the description box. There's a link there to the Nevertheless information where you can download these free posters. Please know that the posters are also available in 8 different languages. So if you want to utilize these for your classroom, if you want to have something to put up in your office, or you want to have something to put up in your child's room if they have an interest in science, technology, engineering, or math, use some great posters that represent women well. Like I stated before, as I started looking at the posters, I came across Miss Gladys West. And I wasn't really familiar with her, but I started researching her story and knew that I needed to pay homage to her. Knew that I was one of the ones that stood on her back as I moved my career forward in technology. And so this series today, the very first episode, is going to spotlight Miss Gladys West. And Miss Gladys West is an American mathematician, and her contributions led to the foundation of the global positioning system. And the global positioning system is what we call GPS. Okay, so the work that she did in the 1970s and the 1980s led to the foundation of GPS technology. Can you believe that? She and what she did, her contribution, her work led to the foundation of GPS technology. Who knew? I didn't know. And again, that is these untold stories of these visionary, intelligent, and pioneering women that just makes their story even that more wonderful. And it makes me wonder why I didn't know this. Why did it take me so long to know who this woman was? So her story has some really unique components also, is that she submitted a bio for an alumni function for her sorority. And that is when people started to realize who she was and what her contributions were. And she was an unsung hero, very similar to Kathleen Johnson, very similar to Mary Jackson, very similar to Dorothy Vaughan. These women contributed science, math, technology to some of America's most biggest moments in our history, and no one knew what they had done. They were unsung heroes. They were visionaries at the time. They were pioneers. They were intelligent women that made these contributions and was never really given the proper credit for it. And so it just amazes me. It amazes me that these type of stories, these rich history stories are not being told. And so that's why Gladys West is the first person to be spotlighted, because her story is unique. Her story is so rich and diverse. And if you want to know more about Gladys West, I implore you to research her. There are interviews with her on YouTube also. She has some interviews on YouTube. Another unique component about her story is that in 2018, which is only 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, she was honored with the highest honor of an Air Force Space Command. She was inducted in the United States Air Force Hall of Fame in 2018, okay? Because of the work she did in the 1970s and the 1980s. She was honored in 2018. I'm going to let that sit for just a minute. Again, these are the unsung heroes, women of color, those who have been there doing the work and not getting the credit for it and not having their stories told. This is our history. This is our history. She's an American mathematician who laid the foundation to GPS technology. Without her contributions, we would be lost. Did you get that? Without her contributions, we would literally be lost, because we probably wouldn't have that technology right now, that GPS technology. So maybe you got it, maybe you did, but if you did, ha ha ha. So today we celebrate her. We celebrate her contributions to our society. We celebrate Miss Gladys West, an American mathematician whose contributions in the 1970s and 1980s led to the foundation of the GPS technology. Thank you, Miss Gladys West. Thank you, Miss Gladys West. From one woman of color to another. I wanted to do this because I wanted to reach not only the women who are in tech, women of color, those future innovators, but also those little girls in the classroom that can look at a poster of Miss Gladys West and say, I can do that too. And that's just awesome to me. So please don't forget to like and subscribe and tune in next week for another episode as we spotlight another woman of color in STEM. Thank you, She Tech Tribe, for your support. And as always, until next time, remember to be great and bye-bye.